I'm jazz pianist and educator Bradley Sowash, and today we're going to be talking about blues scale finger patterns on keyboard. Let me set this up here with what gave me the idea for this three-part series. A dedicated piano teacher, very obviously into it, piano teacher who's educated and has lots of students, wrote me recently and asked me by email the following. She said, and I quote, "A student of mine is in your second level of That's Jazz books, and we are starting to learn the blues in all keys. I am on a quest for a chart of blues scales that are both spelled correctly and offer standard best practice fingerings. I've looked a number of different places for such an animal, and I'm coming up empty-handed. Can you point me in a direction or offer any suggestions? This is a student that potentially will be headed to music school, and I don't want him learning the patterns with poor fingering that will only have to be relearned later. That's a horrible waste of his time and a poor reflection on my teaching. Any help you could provide would be most welcome." So there's the impetus for this session. Here's my reply in part. Thanks for this question. I added it to a list of topics for future improv tips of the month, presentations, or perhaps an eventual publication. And so here we are. Now, the reason that this teacher can't find a reliable resource for blues scale finger patterns on keyboard is that while jazz and blues musicians use the term blues scales as if it were a scale, they are actually not full scales. Rather, they are a collection of notes that are useful for improvising with a down-home, gritty feel. And the fingerings will change from lick to lick because they're asymmetrical and don't lie under the hand like a conventional fingering. However, blues scale set fingerings can be useful for long, fast runs. So we have to adapt conventional scales to our hands for these long runs, but most of the time blues licks are not very long. They're short little spritzes, and we will just deal with whatever fingers are available. So I'm going to hit this today in just 4 short topics. First of all, what are blues scales? Secondly, what are some common blues keys? Then, what are some suggested fingerings or finger patterns? And lastly, I'll show you some exercises you might use to practice them. So, thinking about blues scales for a minute, we can think about them evolutionarily. We've just heard a little bit of them. Just to get that in our ear. So if we think about the history of blues, we can notice that notes that became blue or off color or out of key or bent notes that give it that bluesy character have a kind of evolutionary history in the order that they appear in mainstream playing. Naturally, on individual cases, musicians are going to mix and match these notes, and we might see some earlier or later. But generally speaking, we hear in the history of blues and blues-influenced writing, the first blue note is the flat third. So if I'm in the key of, I'll do it in C. If I'm in C, I'm talking about E flat. So we're having a nice C major chord, and somebody plays this note in the melody, E flat. And you can hear the rub there against the chord. And that is because of the African-American history of blues in America, a kind of a lamenting song-based style or vocal style that would often then, if you want to call it this, correct. Indeed, St. Louis Blues starts on that. I hate to see, I hate to see, by W.C. Handy. So the blue note sort of starts to show up as a flat third just for a little extra color. And then as time evolves a little bit, we start to hear more of the flat 7 coming into the sound of blues, or blues injected or influenced pieces. So we have a flat 7 in the key of C. That would be B flat. And we all know that ending. And that's not all, right? That gives that little grit or color as a tag to a tune, and it begins to show up more and more in melodies. So let's think about Gershwin in B flat. He's in B flat. He plays a flat 7 as the second note of the famous Rhapsody in Blue. Here's that flat third. Flat 7 again. Flat third again. There it is. So we have it showing up in jazz-influenced concert music. We have it showing up with guitar, blues artists. And we have it showing up more and more in pop music. It's only later, really, as much as the early 60s, that the last blue note becomes mainstream, and that is the flat 5. So in the key of C, that's a G flat. So out of those two scales, out of those 3 notes, we can derive a couple of scales, and I've done a whole session on that. And so if you'd like to check that out, I already have a published blog post and video about that called The Other Blues Scale. And in short, in the key of C, the 2 blues scales are an earlier one, which is still quite useful, which is C, D, E flat, E, G, A, C, or a pentatonic scale plus a flat third. I'll show you how to construct that in a minute. Or C, E flat, F, F sharp, G, B flat, C, which is a more of a minor or dark blues scale. If you're not sure how to make a blues scale in a given key, you're going to take a major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, throw away the 4th note and the 7th note. So this time, no F or B. C, D, E, G, A, C, no F or B. Throw in that early blues note, the flat third, C, D, E flat, E, G, A, C, which is the bright blues scale or the major blues scale. Without the flat third, it would just be a pentatonic scale, which also has many uses. But that flat third adds that really American color sound. You know you're kind of listening to a derivative of American indigenous blues when you hear that as a key note. For a minor key, and I want to make sure I say this right, use a natural minor scale, C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. And in this case, we will omit the 2nd and 6th note, or making a minor pentatonic, C, E flat, F, G, B flat, C, and then we will add a flat 5. C, E flat, F, here's the flat 5, G flat or F sharp, G, B flat, C. Now this is the scale that everybody refers to as the blues scale, but there is not a the blues scale because there are actually even more blues scales than the 2 I've mentioned. Major blues scale, a minor blues scale, they have various names. I like to use bright blues scale and dark blues scale to describe them. So again, if you want to learn more about the details there, you can take a look at my blog post called The Other Blues Scale. I have some musical examples there and starter licks. So we've talked so far about what the heck is a blues scale, and now I want to get into common blues keys. So when we play blues music, and even blues-influenced music, as pianists, it depends on the setting we're in as to the keys we're most likely to deal with. So if you're playing with other pianists or in a teaching environment, it's not surprising that we will see blues in the form of like a beginning boogie or something like that in the key of C, G, or F, because those are piano-friendly keys. No surprise there. However, they aren't all that common in actual practice in ensembles. When we hear blues on its, some would argue, original instrument of the early electric guitars, we're going to expect to find blues in E or A and sometimes D. So E, A, and D would be very guitar-centric keys. And when a guitar player says, let's jam a little bit, let's sit down and play a blues, you can pretty much be sure you're going to lean towards the sharp side of the circle of fifths. Because E has 4 sharps, A has 3, and D has 2. My electric guitar is off camera just now, but I've been practicing blues scales on the electric guitar, and it's a lot of fun to get some distortion on and play those classic blues sounds in those keys. It's not so fun to have to play them in say, A flat. I can't find the notes even. So there's a reason for that. It has to do with the open strings on a stringed instrument. Now, if you're going into jazz settings, because jazz instruments are, if you think of the letter J, it forms a saxophone. We always see that in jazz logos. Well, that saxophone is either in B flat if it's tenor or E flat if it's alto. Trumpets are B flat instruments. So a lot of the instruments which we associate with the tradition of American jazz music really are a lot happier when they're playing on the flat side of the circle of keys. And so we can think about, as we practice blues scales, what we're after. Are we trying to get better at being a better pianist? And we would choose those appropriate keys, or we would kind of work with guitar players. On there, we would choose sharp keys, or we use flat keys if we expect to play in small jazz combos or big band settings, or high school jazz bands and things like that. So I'm going to divide these sessions up into, today we'll do C, F, and G, and I'll get more into some of the quirks when we get into the other keys next month in the improv tip of the month. Unfortunately, you can't just move all your fingering, and you can't even move all the notes when you deal with other keys because of the idiosyncratic nature of the terrain on a keyboard. So if you're just joining us, I am Bradley Sowash, jazz pianist educator, and we're talking about blues today, blues scales and blues fingerings. And now we're going to get into the actual fingerings. I will just mention, if you want to go deeper than just this quick half-hour session, I have a couple of resources which take a pretty deep dive into blues subgenres. One of them is specifically for teachers and students, called Learning and Teaching the Blues. And then the other one is Intro to Blues. It's a pre-recorded 4-lesson course that gets pretty deep into it. If you're really, I don't want to say deep into it. It's designed for people who are new to that genre of blues. Let's get into the reason you're here, the actual fingering. So I'm in the key of C, and I'm going to use that bright blues scale. And those notes again are C from the bottom up: C, D, E flat, E natural, G, A, C. Notice how it has a little bit of bluesiness, but it's mostly a pretty happy key. So we're going to use the fingering there quite simply. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Thumb on C and thumb on E. Think of it as two halves. C, D, E flat, thumb comes under, E, G, A. 1, 2, 3. The top note, when you're ready to get there, if you're running several octaves, is pinky on C. So from the bottom up, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, C. C, D, E flat, E, G, A, C. I want to make it clear that if we're playing improvisation, again, I'll say we use any fingering we like. So for example, I'm using all kinds of things, even sliding off black to white. But watch this. That kind of a run, you're not going to get away with unless you've sort of pre-thought through your fingering. And that's exactly why we want to get these down. So C, D, E flat, E, G, A, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and pinky on C. Now, it works out beautifully in the other keys we're going to look at today, because the key of G is the same thing. We just adjust the construction to be G notes. So G, A, B flat, B, D, E, G. G, again, G, A, B flat, B, D, E, G. Same fingering. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, pinky. It's those long runs where you need that fingering. So the reason I emphasize that licks can change is that we want to make sure we don't get sticklery about how we, encourage our students to play these licks. You're going to grab with whatever's comfortable. Fortunately for us, the bright blues or major blues or oldest blues scale in the key of F is also the same fingering. The notes are F, G, A flat, that's your flat third. A is the normal major third, C, D, F. F, G, A flat, A, C, D, F. Oh, I love that note. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 5. So let's hear that in action. Oh, again, fast longer runs is where these fingerings come in handy. So C, G, and F all use the same fingering for the older, major, or bright blues, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then the remaining note is tonic or 5 on top. Now, we're going to look a little at the dark blues scale, or the blues scale, which I don't like that name because it's only the blues scale since the last, 30 years or so, or 40. I don't know how old am I anyhow. And it's a little bit different, and it varies by key. So let's look at it in the key of C first. We can think of it as C minor if we're trained musician. So let's think about it. I'll just give you the notes for a minute. C, E flat, F, F sharp, G, B flat, C. C, E flat, F sharp, G, B flat, C. So I think of this as two halves of a legume or an apple. Think about the C, E flat, F. That's 1, 2, 3, and it feels in the hand very, very comfortable with our strongest fingering. C, E flat, F. The top half of the apple or legume will be G, B flat, C. So in this key of C, those fingers are exactly the same pattern of white and black keys. White, black, white, C, E flat, F. White, black, white, G, B flat, C. Same fingering, 1, 2, 3. So the question becomes, in a long flight, who plays the F sharp? And the answer is your fourth finger. Warning, it feels really weird if you've played a lot of classical scales or traditional scales to put your fourth finger on F sharp. But it's the only way to navigate that quickly. So 1, 2, 3, 4 on F sharp, 1, 2, 3, G, B flat, C. Except if we're going to play a second octave, we're going to put our thumb on C. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, start over, 1. And those notes are C, E flat, F, F sharp, G, B flat, C. Of course, there are many ways to finger that would work as well, but not as fast. To be able to toss that off, we've trained our fourth finger to play that in-between note, if you will, the stem of the apple that has two halves. G, key of G, dark blues, or minor blues, or the blues, is the same, but it's not symmetrical the way it is for C. So the notes are G, B flat, C, C sharp, D, F, G. So if I'm playing one octave, I don't worry about my fingering, but if I'm going to run, those notes are 1, 2, 3, 4 on C sharp, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 on C sharp, 1, 3, G. Let's hear that in practice. It's for those long runs where you're going to need that, and they aren't always scale-like. They can also wiggle away around on the way down. That kind of stuff. So that's where your fingering comes in handy. The key of F is just like in real life with major scale playing. It has a weird fingering. It actually, the dark blues or minor blues or standard blues scale for F is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, but we have to put our thumb on B natural. And that feels very funny to us at first. So the notes are F, A flat, B flat, 1, 2, 3, B natural, thumb on that, C, E flat, and F. So again, notes are F, A flat, B flat, B, C, E flat, and there I'm going to play that either with 3 or 4, the E flat, F. So again, F, A flat, B flat, B, C, E flat, and the fingering is 1, 2, 3, 1 on B, 2, 3, and start over. If you want to substitute a fourth finger for a third here or there because of the anatomy of your hand or what you're used to playing, that's okay. So the basic fingerings there cover C, G, and F, and they're both bright and blues. In practice, we're mix and match those fingerings even within the same piece. So if we're playing a major blues, we can use the bright or major blues scale, and we can throw in a little bit of that dark or minor blues scale. If we're playing in a minor key, we're probably just going to stick to that minor blues scale because the major scale has notes in it which really are not very related to a minor key. So when in doubt, use your bright blues scale, the one that we talk about the least. And then when it gets very minory or gritty or rock and roll, then you can bring in that dark blues scale. Okay, so we're going to wrap up here with a couple of exercises to get you going, so you can practice. These are real simple ways to get these under your finger, and then I'll play a little bit of music. As pianists, we want to have an accompaniment while we practice these scales, and because we don't play these, really we should call them note collections, in both hands very often, it's appropriate to play a different left-hand pattern. And the one where a lot of us will be able to go to at any level, what I just call rocking octaves. So if we're in the key of C, we could just play C, 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 or you could play that twice as fast, depending on the groove you want. And then we would just practice those scales. I'm not playing music right now. I'm just reviewing my fingering. And then maybe I loosen it up. So it's good to go from mechanical to intuitive and a little bit creative thinking as soon as you can. A more interesting one would be to play in the left hand a pattern of 1 or tonic or root, 3. I'm going to play that with my 4th finger, C, E, left hand ring finger on E, and then F is the 3rd finger, and the 2nd finger is on G. C, E, F, G. You're probably wondering why not play it with a more logical fingering. The reason is it's really nice to play C's in between those an octave up, like this. C, C, E, C, F, C, G, C. Let's see. Put on a drum beat if you have it, and then practice the scale. In this case, I'm swinging. And then make it your own. You want to do this for those common keys of C, F, and G. So another pattern, which is in most people's left-hand toolbox, would be that boogie pattern of C to G to C to A. That's what I would do with a late beginner, and just hold that pattern. I'm not changing chords. And now when we change chords, you can change that if you like. Play a C and an F and a G, either in the order that they show up in a blues pattern or just right in a row. The question's going to arise. I know you're going to ask me, do I change scales when I change chords? No. Blues scales are for the whole key. Chords change around under them. You don't need to be concerned with whether or not they fit. Blues scales are blankets you can throw right over the chords and they sound good. Let's check that out. On C, on F, on C. I changed to F. The scale's the same. I changed to C. Here's the G. It even has a B natural in it, but it works great. My right hand was 100% bright blues scale. Okay? So those are good patterns to try. Another one that works for a dark blues scale, you can do a lot of those previous ones I talked about, but if you're in a minor key, of course, C, E flat, F, G works really nicely. So we got to adjust that pattern from root 3, 4, 5 to a flat third just to reflect the key. And now we're switched to that dark blues scale. How I would practice this is I would play it straight first, and then I would play triplets. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then I would loosen it up. So I'm about to cut it out here, but I thought you'd be interested in the end of the thread that I had with this very interesting teacher who asked a great question about blues scale fingerings. I explained some of what we went over today. And she said, "Thank you so much for your thoughtful response. As I continued my research, my conclusion, as you kindly explained, is that it's not cast in stone the way we think of scales in a classical setting. Surprise, surprise. I greatly appreciate knowing the keys that are most typical. We will stick to these and grow more comfortable with them. This is incredibly helpful." So I'm going to take it out now. If you need to go, you can, but I love to do a little ramming and jamming. And I'm going to do that in 3 keys. Since we worked on C, F, and G today, I'll give myself the challenge to improvise in all those 3 keys, and I'll use a boogie bass line as its basis. Otherwise, nice to see you here, and maybe just enjoy a little music if you have time. Let's do it with a rock and roll beat. Changing from C to F. Bright blues, dark blues. Back to bright blues. Let's go to key of G. Trying to use those fast licks to show the utility of good fingering. Oh yeah! Until next time, you enjoy your creative music making journey, and don't be scarce. I love that you spent some time with me today. Bye for now.